Welcome everybody again to the PICS March Madness, Make Reporting a Slam Dunk. We're thrilled all of you are here today. So we have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to go over with all of the attendees, and they are this. This will be a 60-minute roundtable. I am quite certain it's going to go quite quickly. We will have questions and comments come through our Q&A button, which is found on the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you have questions or thoughts throughout the roundtable session, make sure and type them in, and I will be monitoring those and feeding them to the panel to get you your answers. Most importantly, put your cell phones away, relax and enjoy. It's just 60 minutes. We promise you a great time with great conversation. And this recording will be available on our PICS website. So all of you, if you didn't get a chance to share it with any of your colleagues, or your colleagues couldn't join, you will have the ability to see it at a later date from a YouTube video on our PICS website. So with that being said, I'm going to go right into the sponsorship, which this PICS Roundtable was sponsored today by Entech Engineering. So myself and my colleague, Kara Humes, which is right in the center square, I believe, are going to give just a brief on Entech Engineering. So Kara, I'll let you start today a little bit to give some background on Entech.
All right. Thank you, Tori. It's an honor for Entech to sponsor the PICS Roundtable. We're long supporters of PICS and always enjoyed attending and exhibiting at the trainings that in person that hopefully we'll be able to get back to very shortly. But just a little bit about Entech Engineering. We're an engineering consulting firm. We serve municipalities, industry, hospitals, colleges, and universities. And when it comes to support of industrial pretreatment, which we have many clients on both sides that we support, I think what Entech's philosophy always is to find those win-wins. It's working together. It's the partnerships for industry and municipalities to come together. And that's why we love PICS, because that's exactly what PICS does.
Oh, thanks, Kara. I'll just add a few more words to that if I could. I'm a newer team member to the Entech team, and I am just thrilled to be here. It's amazing to be a part of a team that really focuses on communication and networking. Be informed and be confident is the motto that Entech has, and quite honestly, they live it and breathe it every single day. Some of the networking and communications that they push out, not just internally, but externally to all of their clients and potential clients, or just anybody in the industry for that matter, are roundtables similar to these with amazing moderator by Christine Gunsaullus, who is on our call today too. And then also more recently, we've started the Cork. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it. It's a virtual bulletin board that Entech has started, which provides great information on regulations, due dates, just kind of helpful information on the industry, whether it's water, wastewater, industrial, and also great information on funding sources. And that's available to each and every person out there in the industry. So if you get a chance, please make sure and hit the Entech website, www.entecheng.com, and you can find the Cork and any of our roundtables. If you go up to the resource button at the top, click on that, and it'll take you right to those two resources. So hope you get a chance to look at those. And we also will have a very great informational video, which will be attached to this PICS Roundtable video today for later view if you're so interested. And it is truly a pleasure to be, an honor to be a sponsor. Entech is to be a sponsor of today's PICS seminar. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So that being said, we are going to go back, and I am going to share my screen to go over an overview for today's event, what to expect. We are going to introduce our panel today. We are going to give a very brief report, descriptions on the different types of March Madness reports that are out there that we might be talking about in detail. And we'll have a poll question to help spark the conversation with our audience. We will be entertaining questions from the audience today. I will be reffing. I'll take care of you all, and we'll have a wrap up, which will include the panelists' emails and information, some final words from me, and then ultimately when you sign off, we will have an opportunity for you to complete a survey, which has some very simple questions, which helps us with future roundtable topics. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First, we have Joe Klobusicky. He joins us. Hey, Joe, raise your hand. Woo, Joe. Joe joins us today from Chrin landfill. Joe is the environmental manager, and he has been in the solid waste industry for 27 years. I have had the honor and privilege of working with Joe for many years when I was with the Easton Group. So thanks, Joe, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Naiomi Tapia. Hi, Naiomi.
Hello.
Naiomi joins us from Victaulic Cast Iron Pipe. She is Victaulic's environmental engineer with more than 12 years of experience in almost every field of environmental health, safety, and treatment. Thrilled to have you here today, Naiomi. Next, we have Nicole Wilson. Where's Nicole?
Right here.
Hey, Nicole. Nicole is an engineer and technical manager with an emphasis in air quality, and she joins us today from our amazing partners at Earthres Group and has been in the industry for over 21 years. Thanks, Nicole, for being here today. Next, we have Kara Humes. Hey, Kara. Kara joins us today from Entech Engineering. She's a senior project manager and also a PICS board member with a focus in the industrial and municipal sector, and has been in the industry for 36 years. Thanks, Kara, for being here today. Next, Andrew Moore. Andrew.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. He joins us from the Lehigh County Authority. He is also a PICS board member, and he is the compliance coordinator and truly a veteran at roundtables. Thanks for being here today, Andrew. So again, I am your referee for today. My name is Tori Morgan. I am the PICS president and compliance coordinator and senior project manager for Entech Engineering. It is my honor and privilege to be with you, along with my co-moderator, the tank queen, Christine Gunsaullus. I can't say enough about her. 27 years of experience in the industry and truly a mentor to pulling off these roundtables. Thanks, Christine. All right, everybody. Thank you for that. So next, what I'd like to do to kick things off is talk a little bit with all of you about the different types of March Madness reports that are out there. So we thought it would be really helpful to give a very, very brief review on what these reports are and when they're due. And then from there, we're going to go into a polling question from our audience to start some open conversation. So for now, what I'm going to do is hand things off to Kara and Nicole, who are our dynamic duo today to talk about some March Madness reports. So Kara, Nicole, the floor is yours.
Sure. I guess I'll start. I was going to just run down some of the air reports to start with, and this is by no means a full list. It's just to sort of give you a flavor of some of the reports your facilities might have. First, we have the Ames report or emission statement, and those are due March 1st. And that's basically a report of your annual operating data, fuel usage, process data, and emissions. There's the annual compliance certification. That's generally for Title V or major source facilities. And that's going to be an annual statement of compliance with each permit condition. And that's actually due either January 30th or your permit anniversary date. So that's something you want to check on for your own site. Next, we have the semi-annual deviations report. That's a report of your monitoring requirements and if you had any deviations or exceedances in the last 6-month period. And that's actually due January 30th, which is tomorrow, or July 30th. So that's twice a year. Then next we have the annual greenhouse gas report. If you have a landfill or say a hospital with a lot of natural gas usage, you might be subject to that. That's due March 1st, and that's an EPA report, if I didn't mention that already. I'm sorry, March 31st. Next, we have semi-annual NSPS reports. That's a federal EPA report, and that's going to vary again depending on what types of sources you have. If you have boilers or if you have a landfill, you might be subject to that. Those are due January 30th and July 30th. And then last on the air side, we listed the EPA NESHAP SSM reports. That's startup, shutdowns, and malfunctions. And it's a report of those types of events due January 30th and July 30th. On the EPCRA side, which is emergency planning and community right to know, first we have the tier 2 report, and that affects a lot of facilities. That's basically an annual inventory of any chemicals you have on site. And it's not just chemicals, it could be fuel oil, it could be oxygen, it could be batteries, quantities of those chemicals and locations. And that's due March 1st. And that's a really important report because that goes to your local emergency planning commissions and your fire departments. And then lastly, we listed TRI or FORMAR. That's the toxic release inventory. And that's an annual inventory of all your inputs and outputs of pollution. So any air, water, or waste streams in and out of your facility. And that's due to EPA on July 1st. And I believe Kara was going to talk about some of the other reports on the list.
I am. Thank you, Nicole. So residual waste is unique to Pennsylvania. There's not another state that has a regulation that affects waste generated by an industry the way Pennsylvania regulations do. The threshold for a large quantity generator is 2,200 pounds a month. That's just over a ton. And because it includes everything from your general plant trash to any processed wastewater, and with the weight of water, just about every industrial facility is going to be caught in this residual waste regulation. As a large quantity generator, there are three reports that are due. The 26R is a chemical analysis report. That's due annually, and it's due by March 1st. The biennial report, it's due every other year, but it's also due on March 1st. The two reports have many of the same pieces of information included, but there's some differences with chemical analysis giving a little bit more detail on the waste that you're generating and disposing of. The 25R is a source reduction strategy. Now, this doesn't have to be submitted, but it does have to be updated every 5 years and kept in your files. And if you get a DEP inspection, you want to make sure you have these in your files. Hazardous waste, so that obviously is going to go beyond Pennsylvania. There's a biennial report that is due for large quantity generators of hazardous waste. That is also due March 1st, but it's on the opposite year of the residual waste biennial report. So this year in 2021, we'll be doing a residual waste biennial report for the calendar year of 2020. Next year in 2022, those that have to submit the hazardous waste biennial reports will submit for the calendar year of 2021. So if you have both, you'll always be doing a report every year. Some other miscellaneous ones that we just kind of threw in there that industries may or may not have involvement with our MIPP or municipal industrial pretreatment annual report is also due in March at the end of March 31st. And that is a report that the municipalities that have EPA mandated programs have to submit to EPA, including all of the industrial information for the significant industrial dischargers in that municipality. Chapter 94, that's a municipal waste load management report. Now that's done by municipalities in planning for community expansion and to make sure that their wastewater treatment plant has adequate capacity, both from a flow and concentration standpoint, to be able to handle growth in that municipality. And then stormwater, I just kind of threw that in there. It it spans, so our DMR reports for those who have stormwater permits are actually due at the end of January. And then the annual report is due May 1st. So it kind of spans our March Madness just before and just after. So we threw it in there too.
Kara, Nicole, thank you. That is absolutely March Madness for sure. So I think what we'll do now, before we get into some conversation with the panel and questions from the audience, we're going to start things off with a poll from our audience to help drive our conversation today. So audience, you see a poll right up on your screen, hopefully. Please answer that question. What are your biggest challenges in preparing the industrial regulatory reports due in Q1? You can pick multiple answers. So we'll give you a couple seconds here to fill that in and send in your thoughts. And then we will hit our panelists with some good questions. Give it about 15 seconds. Give it like 5 more seconds here to get your answers in. All right, tying things up. Okay, so it looks like lack of time is number 1. Can't get the data easily would be our number 2. And don't know where to go if I have questions, number 3. Interesting. This is good stuff. So, panelists, this is a great start. There are, for industries out there, there are a lot of things that you even if they have to do 2 or 3 of the reports that you just mentioned, how, for instance, do you manage getting that work done with all of your day-to-day work? I mean, are you filling these reports out throughout the entire year? Do you have a plan for getting the information together? And how do you manage getting all that work done? Any thoughts from the panel? Joe?
I think it's best throughout the year to gather your data on a regular basis and keep that updated. And once December comes, you should be pretty well in hand to do a lot of this stuff once January hits. It's easier said than done sometimes with the workloads, but trying to stay on top of it monthly is a big plus.
So Joe, for the reports that you have to do, are you doing quite a few of those reports that were listed by Kara and Nicole?
We are, and we do some of them in conjunction with the RG. Some of the air reports, they handle the AIMS and the GHG for us. We do the annual Title V certs, the semi-annual reports, the NSPS reports we do in-house here. And it's a matter of gathering the data every month and trying to keep on top of it in that respect. It's a little easier with the NSPS because that's due every 6 months. So that's in your routine anyway. The annual certifications, it's a big document, as Nicole can attest to, and you got to go through page by page and make sure you're certifying yourself to all the terms and conditions of the permit.
Great. Naiomi, you had a thought.
I did, yeah. So we, in the environmental office, we actually do all the reports for all the Victaulic facilities in North America. So by the time March 1st gets here, we have probably 60 plus reports that we put together. So it is definitely a stack of paperwork. Death by paper cuts is what my boss usually says. So we definitely have to stay on top of the facilities to collect the data, and starting first of the year when we all get back, whether it be the 2nd or the 4th, depending on the date, emails are going out left and right to make sure that we get all the data in a timely manner. If you don't have the data, we end up spending time tracking it down. So we do put in processes as best we can to make sure that the plants are collecting the data up front, and we get it periodically throughout the year as well, so we can do spot checks. But to Joe's point, if you don't have that data, you're pretty much stumbling trying to collect stuff. So the sooner you can do it, the better.
So I just want to remind our audience too, if you have questions or thoughts for our panelists as we go through this discussion, make sure and put them in the Q&A and we'll pass them through. So to add on to that conversation, you know, you talk a lot about the data and making sure that it's available. Do any of you have thoughts or ideas on how to better manage data? You know, most of the reports nowadays, I would assume, the March Madness reports are electronic, so you're submitting and uploading those. Do you have a system or a mechanism to compile that data? Do you have some helpful advice you could give to our audience? Kara, thoughts?
So I look back, I think we've come a long way. Back in the day, I used to get handwritten notes from clients over fax machine. Now, can you imagine trying to read something that they wrote in pencil? So in pencil and then fax to me on that old slippery, shiny paper. So one of the things that I think has made a huge difference is to keep our records in Excel spreadsheets. If you develop those spreadsheets ahead of time and then share the load, different people can be filling things in as time goes on. But I think having things typed out and clear, that when it comes to actually doing the report, you're not struggling to try to read numbers or figure out what this is. The other thing, when you develop those spreadsheets, be really clear on units of measure. Is something in cubic feet? Is it in million cubic feet? Is it in therms? For a lot of the reports that we have to submit, whether it's waste or air or tier 2, having those units of measure identified in our records is very important.
Good point. Naomi?
So we have, because the data comes from so many different facilities, we have set templates that we send out annually to the facilities so that we're, to Kara's point, you get the units the way that you need them, you get the readings the way that you need them. And if there is any conversions or anything like that, we just get the straight data from the facility and then we do those conversions. So if you have a set template for everybody, you're getting all the data feeding into you exactly the same. So you're not trying to decipher what the data is. And then you can actually just analyze it and then put it in the report as needed rather than spending more time trying to figure out what you have in front of you.
That's great. You know, I've noticed too, I think Joe, you mentioned it, there's, with all the different types of reports that are out there and are due, and there's a lot that you're responsible for. You mentioned some of them you do in-house and some of them you subcontract maybe to a consultant or an expert or whoever. What's involved with that decision making for you? I mean, are there some reports that you do, and what are they that are more complex, that are more easily handled by an outside firm, or how does that work?
The AIMS and the GHG, we typically have ERG do those, and it's a matter of time and how complex they are. They're very good at doing them. We get them the package of data as soon as possible in January, and they're able to grind through it pretty quickly, because there is a lot due by March 1st and the end of March with the air side.
Interesting.
So it certainly helps. And Nicole, you could probably chime in on that. I know you guys, this is a really heavy time of year for you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Definitely, I was going to add one thing we do, because there's so many different facilities, and look, to Joe's point, his facility, there's so many different ways of tracking tonnages and spreadsheets. So what we've been trying to do is keep almost like a Word document with notes every year saying, okay, we got this number from this spreadsheet and why and how we used it, and trying to keep sort of detailed records of where we came up with the numbers, say last year, to make the reporting this year easier and more consistent. So the other, I guess, sort of part of that would be that we like to start early, because there's so many different little pieces that maybe one or two people at the landfill can get, or one of our engineers can get. So there's just a lot of different elements that go into each report.
So, Kara.
I love what Nicole just said, because having that documentation and almost like instructions on where this stuff came from. One of the things that it's a challenge, whether it's from the industry side or even if you're using a consultant, is change of personnel. So somebody that did that report last year may not be there to do the report this year. And if you have that kind of detailed instruction, it is so helpful versus having somebody trying to figure out what was in someone else's head and how they were going about it. Great tip.
Good point. Andrew, I know you come from a different perspective because you're an IPP coordinator, so you're not doing the industry specific reports, but you know, a lot of the same type of information and gathering of the information applies to the different reports you have to do as well. And there are some that are the same, like the tier 2 reports. I know you guys probably have to do those, but for the like annual IPP, do you find that these mechanisms for managing data and ensuring that you get an early start, does that all apply to you as well and how you do your reports?
Yeah, absolutely. We have about 45 industries or so in the city. So if I don't keep track of all that information going month to month, I mean, it can get overwhelming very, very fast.
Yeah. So one of the things I know is recent, they are DEP is revising Greenport, which is that's great. That could be a blessing and a curse depending on how well it goes. And also I know that like we talked about just a couple minutes ago, many of these reports are uploaded to our agencies for completion. Let's be honest, I would probably guess that everybody is doing the work and uploading it all at the same time. What does that, I see some smiles. What does that do? What challenge does that bring? And what are all of your thoughts on the transition to this new Greenport site and any of the new electronic reporting that's out there? I know we just recently, there was a roundtable not too long ago. There's some new reporting for the IPP annual report too. So just throwing that out there for some conversation. Thoughts?
The Greenport's been great. Everything from EDMRs to the tonnage and fee reports. But again, you got to get in there early and get ahead of it. But I've had a lot of luck using it. Nicole, you've used a lot of it. It's been good to use. I haven't had any real issues with submissions of anything, whether it's the residual waste Form U applications or the fee reporting data or the stormwater DMRs. It's pretty smooth.
Great.
I would agree. It's compared to like iSteps or New Jersey Radius, Greenport's really a lot better than that. It's like any software. I've noticed if you log in, it doesn't like if I log in as me and I log in as somebody else with their information, it sort of messes up like with the cookies and stuff like that. And then like any software, if you wait till February 27th at 3 p.m. to start entering data, you're probably going to get some lag. But overall, it really has been a pretty good platform to work with.
I think I've found more issues with the PATS site from Department of Labor and Industry. When you're going to do those tier 2 reports, there are so many times where I feel like everybody's on there at the same time and the whole system just bogs down. When you think that of the number of facilities that are using that site and at the same time. So we found if you log on either really early in the morning or later at night, you won't have that lag and you can get things done a lot more efficiently.
Naiomi.
I definitely have to agree with Kara. So the tier 2 is definitely the largest report that we have to put together, but we do them for varying states and all the states differ. Like the programs are very similar, but then there's some that are drastically different. So depending on what time of day you're entering data, yes, it's probably usually like 4 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night when most people are not working on these things because they do shut down. And there's been multiple times that I've entered data and you get the donut of death that just keeps circling and circling and it never saves. So again, if you can start doing your reports earlier in the season, it's definitely helpful. The other one that we've struggled with in the past was the Ames report and doing your area emissions. Oftentimes that it's gotten better through the years, but oftentimes just going and stepping through the different pages, you can often miss a page because each page that you click on, the same links will actually take you back to the very beginning of that again, and you don't know where you are in the form. So you have to step through every single individual link in the initial, I guess, like title index. But then you may click on a link in the page and it'll take you back to the very beginning. So just something to keep in mind.
Great, great. I know, Kara, I think you had mentioned this to me in a previous conversation with the changes with the tier 2 reporting. They went from the MSDS to the SDS. And I think for many individuals, industries or utilities, whoever's filling out those reports, that has become a bit of a challenge. Maybe you could give some insight to that, Kara.
Yeah, actually, Nicole and I had this conversation as well. The Department of Labor and Industry has really gotten tough with requiring SDSs. So under the globally harmonized system, MSDSs were, they're no longer allowed to be used. And this comes from an OSHA regulation. So if you have them in your facility for any of your chemicals, you should be and should have already replaced them with SDSs. But oftentimes with the tier 2, if you're reporting chemicals that you've been reporting for years, you may have had an old MSDS attached to the system. You have to remove that and then upload an appropriate SDS. The other thing, Nicole, let you talk about the mapping that we were talking about, all those requirements.
Yes, so with the tier 2, you usually have to upload a site map, and L&I has gotten a little stricter about including real specific latitude and longitude and other pieces of data. They are good about reaching out to facilities oftentimes in like the summer, sort of in the off reporting months to get uploads of updated site maps. But they are, we see them come back to a lot of facilities with real specific, again, to Kara's point, the SDS versus MSDS, and then site maps with very specific latitude and longitude and other pieces of information identified on those.
So I'm curious to the panelists, and again, if anybody has any questions or thoughts, please make sure and put them in the Q&A and I'll pass them along. But I'm curious to the panelists with the limitations and of that COVID in this pandemic has brought to us, and with all of the reports that are due in Q1 and some specific in at the end of March, has there been any changes or flexibility from the receiving agencies in getting those reports or getting your data from wherever you're getting your data from? Is there any input or insight you can give to our audience today on that, or is it the same?
I've seen it. It's been pretty much the same for us. I haven't seen any changes or any requests or anything from the regulatory side that says you can, wait on your reports for this period or anything. So it's been pretty much status quo for us.
Andrew, does that apply to you as well from the municipal side?
Yes, as far as I know, there has not been any deadlines that have been extended.
Gotcha. Kara, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to say one of my concerns going into this year, and we were talking about the electronic reporting. So with an electronic report, you have, and again, we have different people that may be coming and going in your organization. I think it's important that people share usernames and passwords for these types of reporting platforms. It's hard to make that transition. If somebody leaves, then and you don't have their login credentials, it gets very cumbersome. And I'm worrying about COVID and with the regulators working remotely, how quickly they're going to be able to respond to requests for resetting that information when we have changes of responsible officials, because you can have certain people that are inputting the information, but then it requires a separate login with a separate username and password for the responsible official to actually submit those reports. And again, as those people change, we have to rely on the department, whether it's L&I or somebody from DEP for Greenport, to make those changes. So I'm wondering how COVID's going to affect that.
Yeah, we might not see that for a little while yet. That's going to be a, lingering on. Naomi.
Yes, so we actually just had to go through a change of title, and we have a new facility that we just brought up, so we had to get them set up in the system. Fortunately, DEP has made a number of changes, and again, going back to the Greenport site, that made it the easiest one because everything was done electronically. So that was helpful there, but there are still some of the websites that you have to go through a manual entry from the DEP. So you actually have to have a signature authority, you have to sign the paperwork, you have to fax it or email it or whatever. Some of them will not even accept faxes or email. You have to send it physically to the department. And with that physical send, you now have the dilemma that a lot of the people are working from home. A lot of the agencies are actually collecting them once a week. They'll go and they'll pick up their mail from different places. So it may go several weeks before it actually gets distributed to the people who actually need it. So again, time is definitely imperative in that one. There has been some notices that went out early COVID, like maybe March of last year, that they were doing some leniencies here and there. But if you talk to the inspectors or the local people that were actually at your regional office, they would tell you, get it in by the deadline, because there's no guarantee that somebody would not go back as an inspector and still say, oh, well, you were late. It was
Right.
postmarked late. So regardless, you still want to meet those deadlines.
We did have a comment. It's a thought here. I can't say I know a lot about it from the audience, that we may want to mention the OSHA e-keeping, which is due March 2nd. I'm not sure this is an environmental report. I don't know much about it, but is anybody on the panel familiar with that report?
That's in health and safety. That's on the OSHA side, is a health and safety side. But
All right,
it adds to March Madness for those, especially those industries that
it sure
are
does.
wearing the multiple hats of both environmental and health and safety.
Yeah, and very good point, because at many of the industries, that individual or that group of people they're all the same people, environmental, health, and safety. So they're doing all of those reports. So I just want to touch on this with the panelists, because it was number 3 on the list. Where do we go when we have questions? That was one of the number 1 polling hits. So Nicole, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we found most of if we have questions on, say there's a new source at a facility and it's not in the AIMS emission statement reporting structure yet, how do we address it? We found if we reach out to like the facilities inspector to see how they want to see it, report it, they've been really helpful. That goes back to, again, you want to start early, because if you wait till the day before it's due, they're not going to have time to adjust it. But a lot of times we can talk to the inspector and to the people over at emission statements, and they can make updates to the site's reporting structure. Now, with that said, usually it takes at least an overnight period for Greenport to reset. So that's why you don't want to wait till the very last minute. But I mean, we found that usually, 9 times out of 10, the DEP contacts for the site will be really helpful in terms of, sort of asking those questions up front, and then you're sort of getting the report into the format that everybody wants to see, us, site, DEP, and then you're not going back and doing revisions as much after the fact.
Good point. Joe.
To what Nicole said, reaching out to, if you have a consultant, they can certainly help you, but don't be afraid to reach out to DEP or EPA for that matter. It's an opportunity not just to get your answer, but to do some relationship building with the regulatory agency.
Very good.
Much face time as you can get with them, the better off you're going to be.
Much agreed. Andrew, any thoughts on that? I know you, as pretreatment coordinators in my past life, and you as a pretreatment coordinator now, having that connection with the department to ask those questions is just crucial. You have any additional thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, actually, just having anyone in the DEP or the EPA is very helpful, especially if you don't know who you're supposed to go to. I've always had good experiences with them being able to point me in the right direction of who to contact if I'm, trying to do a different report or trying to get other information.
Good point. Naomi.
So one of the things, and it seems pretty simple and sometimes it's frustrating because it doesn't always work, but oftentimes if you absolutely don't know where to go to, say for example, with the tier 2 for whatever state you're working on, at the bottom of the website or in the instructions, it usually says if you have questions, call this number. With COVID, I'm not too sure how that's going to work right now, but usually it takes you to a direct central line of people only working on the tier 2s. So they can at least guide you and direct you to how you should do something or a section within the instructions. The same was true of the Ames report. Just look for the contact number on whatever website you're entering the stuff into, and usually it directs you to that group that's overseeing the report.
Good point. Yeah, definitely. You know, and I'm going to plug Entech again, but, you know, I really want people to know that, you know, reach out to, and PICS for that matter, that's what we do. It's networking, it's resourcing. That's what we do. So if you can't find your answers, reach out to one of the PICS board members, send something in, send a note in. There's, you know, for Entech, we have the cork. We have a mechanism that if you have a question, if we don't have the answer, we'll get it for you. Use those resources, use those people, because there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. Somebody out there has had the same problem or question you've had, I guarantee it. So it's just a matter of finding out who that is and gathering the information. So I just wanted to throw that out. So with all of these different types of reports, you know, and being able to manage data and handle all those things, just out of curiosity, you know, from like a little roundabout with the whole panel, what do you think is the biggest challenge, and how have you overcome it? Like, how have you overcome that challenge with doing all of these different types of reports? And for many of you, it's come with experience because you've been doing them for a long time. But for all of our audience, if you could share. Kara.
Coffee, lots of it.
Yes, lots
For
of
sure.
caffeine.
Lots of caffeine. Lots of caffeine.
Lots of caffeine, yes. Long nights. I mean, the reality is, all of these regulatory agencies decided through their wisdom that it would be a great idea to make all of these reports due at the same time in the shortest month of the year, when things like natural gas bills, you might not even get the December data until mid to late January. So let's just coffee.
It's so true. You know, I'll throw out there too, since many of these reports, some of it is information from your industry, obviously, but a lot of it is data. So having that good relationship with your contract lab, if you're gathering information from your contract lab, you know, and I found through experience, you know, if your contract lab can help you out and provide you some of that bulk data in an Excel spreadsheet that you can then take and filter and manipulate the information to fit into your reports, it's a huge time saver. So that was something I learned over the years. And I know any of the contract labs that I've worked with, they've been phenomenal at helping out with those things. So any other thoughts from the panelists on that, Naomi?
Don't be afraid to be a nagging pain to get your data. and making sure that you're actually checking like a QA QC type deal to make sure that your data matches what their data does and you can consolidate those records. So, but I know a lot of the people that I work with here at the facility, every year I send out the same thing. Sorry guys, it's that time of year again. I'm going to be bugging you until you get me the data. If you don't want me to bug you, you know, get me the data soon. And it's gotten repetitive, but they all know me at this point. So it's like, okay, if we don't get the data to her in the you know, timely fashion, it might cause some problems for them as well. So, and it's more that there's always that fear of like, okay, what is going to be the repercussion if you don't get that report in on time? So just knowing what those effects are too, it helps you explain to the people who are getting the data so that they understand, hey, it's not just data for data, we need it for a reason.
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking of, you know, Andrew's position. It's like this domino effect. So, you know, Andrew's reports, some of his biggest reports as a pretreatment coordinator, Andrew, are gathering information from the industry. And at the same time that he's doing that and bugging the industry's having to do all their own reports too. So it's like this domino effect of, I need this, I need this, I need this. So, you know, it really does come full circle. And it's good to have this type of conversation to know what angle everybody's coming from when they have these things due. Nicole, did you have something to comment on too?
No, I was just gonna say I agree with what everybody said, and it's just I think that it goes back to the earlier you start, the better. And one thing I was going to touch on in relation to COVID too, in terms of data gathering, we physically haven't been able to go to some of our sites since a lot of them are actually hospitals, so that's really impacted. It's so much easier. Kara can probably agree. It's so much easier to physically go somewhere and make some copies, and you get 90% of what you need versus now having to go back and forth through email or phone and explain, no, this is a sheet we usually are looking for and trying to get that data. So that's definitely been a complication this year.
Absolutely. I think, Kara.
Now that Nicole brought up about COVID, it triggered another thought that you and I talked about the other day, and that's especially for tier 2 reports. A lot of times we get lulled into a sense of, well, these are the chemicals we've been reporting for years, and that's all. But keep in mind, with COVID, there was a time where places were very worried that they weren't going to be able to get their supplies, and maybe typically they would only keep 2 drums on site. But because they were worried about not being able to get that chemical, maybe they ordered 10 drums, and then for that period of time, they would have triggered tier 2 reporting for storing additional quantities. So it's something for all of our industries and consultants and everybody doing tier 2 reports. Keep in mind that you may have some additional things to think about, and maybe that was just for a period of time in, April, May, June, and now we're back down to normal inventories. But tier 2 is looking at the entire reporting year, and it's at any one time. So you may have triggered it even if it was just for a short period of time.
That's a good point, Kara. Things, during the pandemic, which, obviously we're still in, people had to make different arrangements with the chemicals they kept on site, which could have triggered something new in their tier 2 reporting. So good point. Good point. Joe, did you have your hand up there and I missed you?
I was just going to say, speaking to Naomi's point about being a pest and reminders, set up electronic reminders, not only for yourself, but the people that are getting you the data, and do them regularly, whether it's weekly or monthly. Keep it on the forefront of what they're doing. That helps, I think.
I'm looking at our attendee list and I see many of my very wonderful friends from some of the contract labs. And when you mentioned, Naomi, to be a nag, that I'm always afraid that that's the quote after my name, because they probably see me, they probably get the phone call and they're like, oh my God, there she is again. Oh my God, there she is again. But they're so accommodating, and they are so wonderful in helping to make the reporting process easier for anybody that they're doing work for. So, like you said, don't be afraid, like Joe mentioned, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Don't be afraid to ask the question more than once, because, it's a learning process for them as well. And it only makes the process simpler and more streamlined. So it makes perfect sense, for sure, for sure. So, are there any other thoughts or comments? I haven't seen a whole lot come in from our audience. So I wanted to kind of round things up a little bit with our panelists today and talk just a little bit more about changes over the past, let's just say over the past, I don't know, 3 years with reporting. Have you seen significant changes with all these March Madness type reports? Have they pretty much remained the same? Have they become easier to do, harder to do? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think they've become easier.
Oh, I stumped you.
If anything,
Well,
some of them have increased in complexity. Probably the Ames reporting and the GHG stuff.
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
I have a tricky one here for you. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to say to Joe's point, yeah, it seems like, and it's not even just limited to the past 3 years, like just with the Ames report, 10, 15 years ago, DEP wanted to see PM and PM10. Now they want to see PM10, PM 2.5, and PM condensables. And then like Joe said too, they've added the greenhouse gases in the past several years. So it's just always sort of changing.
So thank you for that. I'm going to add another thought here, just to kind of circulate some conversation. And you don't have to name names. Have any of you had the situation where you know somebody or that they did hand in a report late, they couldn't get all the information? You know, is there like something you can share that to help the audience that might have found themselves in that situation or looking at that situation? Anybody? Naiomi.
Tori, I'm guessing you were asking about the late reporting. Is that correct? It cut out just a little bit.
Yes.
So, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I haven't submitted a late report, but we've had reports that have been looked at a previous job that I was at that actually were considered late because of some other dilemma in the way that it was either accepted or not accepted correctly at the DEP. So they didn't like our data. They didn't like it was the way that it was reported because they felt that it needed to be done one way as opposed to another one. And it was for lithium batteries. So anybody who actually reports on lithium batteries, it's do you report the acid, do you report the lead, or do you report it as a lithium battery as a whole? And that was mostly for fork trucks. So we went back and forth with the DEP and we actually ended up having to argue, but we did get our submission in on the appropriate date. So some of the companies that I've worked with that have actually religiously submitted late, and that's not where I'm working for now, just to clarify, but this is past experience. They did actually receive a fine because they were religiously late with their documentation.
Interesting. Interesting. Any other? Kara?
Yeah, and the department, we touched on this a little earlier, the department isn't very apt to grant extensions. So if you're going to request it, make sure you have a good solid reason for it. But one of the things that we've found in recent years, especially with the air reports, the department seems to be constantly changing their position on who has to submit these reports. We had facilities that had been submitting for years, and then they were told, okay, well, your emissions are lower now, so you don't have to submit. Now they change and they said anybody that is a major emitter or a synthetic miner, you have to submit. But now if you've transitioned to a natural miner state-only permit, now you don't have to submit. But we've had some clients get caught in that loop where we request, do we have to submit? And the department says, no, you don't have to submit. And then we do some calculations and we say, okay, so we don't have to submit for them. And then at the end they come back and they say, you know what, yeah, you have to submit. And then we're scrambling and we may not be able to submit on time depending upon when we find that out. And then if we do have to make that request for an extension, what I can say is document it well. I like to confirm it via an email and get that response back from the department agreeing to it and keeping that in the file.
Good point. Very good point. All right, Naiomi.
To add to what Kara said, we've had a facility as well that they bounce back and forth on whether or not they need to report for the year or not. So we've, previous years, we would look at it just to say, oh, okay, no, this is fine. We don't have to do it anymore. But we got into the habit of, because the rules change so much annually, we just look at it regardless and say, okay, is the report due or is it not due? So if we do that, then you know it's already in your schedule. You just double check it. You have all the documentation to Kara's point, and then that way you can just put that one behind you. If you don't have to report, you don't have to report. Now you have it documented as to why.
Great
Yeah.
point.
That's a good point, Naiomi. I think for many of these reports, even if the industry feels like they don't need to report, it's not a bad idea to document why you feel you don't need to report. We do that a lot with Form R, where a facility will go through the effort to demonstrate why it's not needed and keep that in the file. So, Yeah, it's a pain when we have all of these reports that we know are due, and then you have to roll in the reports that you're pretty sure aren't due. But going through that exercise and having that documentation is a good idea.
I would,
Okay.
I would agree with Kara, just to add on to that. We've had situations where EPA's actually come back and asked facilities to say, hey, you've reported it TRI in the past. We don't think you have to do it anymore. We agree, but can you provide that determination, that backup that shows you don't have to report? So I would totally agree with Naiomi and Kara to have that backup for each report, for each site, if you can.
So document, document, document. So I hate to do this, but we've come to that final hour moment where we need to start wrapping things up. So I have a little fun project for us. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. So everybody, to wrap things up today, what we're going to do is, for our panelists, is a buzzer beater. Okay? Now, the panelists have literally 2 seconds to give an answer, or they're going to get the buzzer. They're out. I'm going to throw them a tea and they're out. And the question is, and you can't raise your hand, I'm just going to call on you. The question is this for our audience today. What is the #1 tip you will leave with our audience to beat March Madness reporting? Joe, starting with you, 2 seconds.
Prepare ahead.
Good answer. Nicole.
Have more than one person who can do or is familiar with each report.
Fantastic. Andrew.
If you're getting information from other people, give them deadlines. Don't leave it open-ended.
Good one. Kara.
Share usernames and passwords.
Good idea. Naiomi.
Start early, to Joe's point, but don't be afraid to be a nag to get your data.
Love it. Wow, I didn't have to throw any technicals, no buzzers. Man, you guys are good. You guys are good. So to wrap things up today, I just wanted to bring up the contact information for all of our panelists. I want to thank everybody for joining today's PICS Roundtable. Again, to get a copy of today's presentation, please make sure and visit the PICS website, www.lvpix.org. Also want to send a special thank you out again to our sponsor today, Entech Engineering. Thank you, Entech. And thank all of you for joining us. It was a thrill and honor to have you join in and listen to our panelists. It was great to spend time with you today. And keep watching the PICS website. We'll be sending information on our next roundtable. So panelists, thank you so very much for your time. It was a pleasure and honor having you on our show today. Have a great one, everybody. Stay safe and well.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.